Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session on the folk tongue, or bilingualism in poetry. I'm very happy to share the stage with Sabitha, who is a long-term friend of mine, but also a poet whose work speaks to me, whose feedback I regularly go to, and from whom I think there's a lot for all of us to learn, because she's not just a poet, but she's also a critic and a scholar. So Sabitha, the thing is, when we look at this title, The Folk Tongue, and it was your inspiration to have this title for our session, could you tell us a little bit or read this preface on why our session is called The Folk Tongue?
Uh, Thank you, Meena. Meena is, as she just said, she's been a dear friend and a fellow poet. We share our lives and our poetry with each other. So it's quite a pleasure to be here with all of you and with Meena. So this, the title, Forked Tongue, എന്നുവെച്ചാൽ പിളർന്ന നാവ്, in Malayalam അത് പിളർന്ന നാവ്. അപ്പോൾ I write in both Malayalam and English actually. So I don't want to start by reading my own poem, right?
Sure.
So the idea for this pilarna naavu, forked tongue, adu vannathu enganeyanchal. So the idea was to think of people who have multiple heads, poets who have more than one head, rendu thala, moonu thala, nalu thala, in different languages. Meena has a second head in Tamil. I have a second head in, I have two first, actually both of us have two first heads. Malayalam and English for me, and Tamil and English for Meena. So the idea was, it's not just two heads, but also two tongues, right? So the forked tongue, or pilarna naavu, conceptually, the idea was to look at how bilinguality actually is a fundamental premise for the kind of work that both of us do. Yeah, രണ്ട് ഭാഷകൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രമേ അത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. What we do is not possible for a monolingual person, I think, because we translate between languages, we inhabit different language worlds. So the forked tongue then conceptually becomes also two heads, or more than two heads even sometimes. So in my, as Meena said, in my book Hereafter, I actually start the book with a preface in poetry. Adu kavithayalla ട്ടോ, so don't judge me by this poem, it's not a good poem. But it's a preface written in verse, basically. I'll just read that because I think that's kind of the conceptual thing. Forked tongue. എന്നുവെച്ചാൽ പിളർന്ന നാവ്. I was born with a forked tongue. In nursery twang it sang A for Amma, the mother tongue, B for Britain, and C for Chechi. It learned to say D for Delhi and E for English, the other tongue. Ma for Malayalam and Ka for Kavita. It could say the retroflex R of Tamil and Mara with unpracticed ease. It struggled to pronounce sclerosis and instead wrote of dancing feet out of step with rhyme and time. It sang of learning to walk in baby steps and learning to say ka, kha, ga, gha, A for Amma, and L for love and life in poetry.
Thank you.
Meena, I would actually ask you to read your poem, I Dream in English.
Thanks, Abhi. Thanks for that poem for setting the ground and kind of what it means to exist in in and between these two languages. And for me, the thing is, I often think about um why English, why poetry in English, and it's not an easy answer because. On the one hand, there are writers like Kamala Das who were writing, which I was reading as a teenager, and immediately you felt that this captures an experience and an expression that you never encountered before. And somehow reading those poems validate your existence. It validates your deepest fears, desires, all of that. So, in that sense, because someone was already there before you and laid the ground, you got the confidence to take your first steps. You got the confidence to, talk and express yourself. Uh, but also, I think and this I have to actually talk about, is that Sabi is the daughter of Sachidanandan, and my father is a Tamil scholar. And always my fear about writing in Tamil came from the fact that my father is a Tamil scholar. You are very frightened. I mean, like, fathers don't understand what role they play in our life, but my father, I was always afraid of getting his approval because my mother's approval was very difficult to get. So, whatever I did, even if I got first rank, my mother would say, okay. And later I realized in life that when she says okay, it is the biggest compliment. If she's not criticizing, that okay from my mother is how I wanted validation. And for my father, I did not even try to get his validation, even though he was always supportive. So Tamil for me was, if I do a mistake in Tamil, I will hurt my father more than anything I do in life as a trespass. Not listening to him is one thing, but making a mistake in Tamil would be like treachery and betrayal. So it took me a lot of courage to, like, now I translate, now I express myself, I can actually hold conversations with him. But this is over 20 years. It is over a lifetime to, earn that, go from being a daughter to a comrade. Going from being a daughter to, like a student or like, and it's an amazing journey. So, but the thing is that when and I speak in my mother tongue with my parents, my father doesn't speak English. So it's a language that for me is very precious because it's the, the language of home, or at least, the parental home. So I'll just read this poem, which was one of my earliest poems, which kind of, I think you'll understand, but it's the struggle of how are you a Tamil person and what do you write in English? So the poem is called Mulligatawni Dreams, and it starts with, I dream of an English full of the words of my language, an English in small letters, an English that shall tire a white man's tongue, an English where small children practice with smooth round pebbles in their mouths to spell the right ra, an English where a pregnant woman is simply stomach child lady. An English where the magic of black eyes and brown bodies replaces the glamour of eyes in dishwater blue shades and the airbrush romance of pink white cherry blossom skins. An English where love means only the strange frenzy between a man and his beloved and not between him and his car. An English without the privacy of its many rooms. An English with suffixes for respect. An English with more than 36 words to call the sea. An English that does not belittle black or brown, men and women. An English of tasting with 5 fingers. An English of talking love with eyes alone. And I dream of an English where men of that spiky, crunchy tongue buy flower garlands of jasmine to bring home to their coy wives for the silent demand of a night of wordless, whispered love. So, this is where it comes from. And very disappointingly, I managed to marry a man who neither speaks English or Tamil. He's a French guy. And yeah, I don't get my flower garlands of jasmine. But yeah, Sabi, I wanted you to, yesterday I met her, and for people who are friends, we also went into this really deep intellectual discussion on how do we frame this bilinguality in Indian poetry. And she was talking about the example of Arun Kulatkar, who, laid the framework or the groundwork, and I want you to reflect a little bit on his work.
I would actually consider Arun Kolatkar systemically, actually, as the person who really, as the poet, as the Indian poet, who embodies Randu Bhasha, who embodies 2 languages with great ease, Marathi and English. He's possibly actually, and not possibly, he's almost definitely the very best poet to write in English from India. He's of course no more now. And he wrote very, very original poetry in both Marathi and in English, and never translated himself. So these are, I mean, I sometimes translate myself, but mostly again, my own work also is English exists separately. My English poems are separate from the Malayalam. Malayalam poems I don't translate into English. So this idea of living in two languages, who do I consider my guru for that, and who is actually the person who's really embodied it? It is Arun Kolatkar. He brings actually the world of Marathi into English. He brings the also Bombay dialect, the Bombaya Hindi. Arun Kolatkarinte English kavithakalil you can get to hear traces of the Bombaya Hindi. You have the entire literary world of Marathi in his poetry. Tukaram, Vitthal, അവിടുത്തെ ഒരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട സെയിൻറ്റ് വിഠ്ഠല. അപ്പോൾ so he writes, there is this amazing book which everybody must read. Anybody who's interested in poetry must read this book, Jejuri. So Jejuri is actually it's a single poem. This book is actually a single sequence of poems of traveling to this place called Jejuri in Maharashtra, which has a Vithala temple. അവിടെ വിഠ്ഠല നമ്മുടെ ഈ അയ്യപ്പൻ്റെ പോലത്തെ ഒരു ദൈവമാണ് വിഠ്ഠല. അപ്പോൾ and it's a major center of pilgrimage. Jejuri is a major center of pilgrimage especially for Marathis, but also for all Western Indians actually. So this poem, the sequence actually is about traveling to Jejuri to see Vithala. And it starts with actually a bus journey. So the first poem is actually the bus. I won't read that. I'll read just the first 4 lines of that. The bus. The tarpaulin flaps are buttoned down on the windows of the state transport bus all the way up to Jejuri. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെയാണ് അത് തുടങ്ങുന്നത് with a bus journey. It starts with a bus journey. And then there are poems titled The Priest, The Clock in the Railway Station, things like that. And the dog, there is like a limping stray dog outside the temple. So what Kolatkar also does is actually to make sacred the everyday. So the dog is sacred, the bus is sacred, the clock is sacred, the beggar who sits outside the temple is sacred, the prostitute who comes to Vithala is sacred. So what he does is something very, very profound, which I think is true actually of many poets who came after him, like all of us maybe, that there is this very, very Indian sensibility about this, right? Where the everyday, ella dainamdina കാര്യങ്ങൾ അതെല്ലാം പവിത്രമാണ്. All of that is sacred. There is no difference between the sacred and the profane. And so he does this amazing job of bringing not only two worlds together, but also the sacred and the profane. So I'll just read a very, very short poem from this, Chaitanya. അപ്പോൾ അവിടെ Chaitanya is of course a saint of Vithala. Chaitanya, sweet as grapes are the stones of Jejuri. Sweet as grapes are the stones of Jejuri, said Chaitanya. He popped a stone in his mouth and spat out gods. ഭയങ്കര കവിതയാണത്. It's like probably one of the very best poems ever written in English or something. Yes. So Meena, I wanted to also ask you about your experience of translating the Tirukkural into English, right? It's which is where you make it also your own. And I just wanted to go back to that one line you said when you were reading I Dream in English. which is also, you know, what are our languages of desire, right? സ്നേഹത്തിൻ്റെയും കാമത്തിൻ്റെയും ഭാഷ. So how, when we inhabit multiple languages, what are the kinds of, you know, there is the sacred, there is the erotic, there is the everyday, there is the literary, you know, there are multiple worlds that we engage with when we write and when we read. Readers also engage with these multiple worlds, right? So Meena's book of translations from of the Tirukural, it's called the Book of Desire, and Meena brings her own, you know, it's her book, right? I mean, it is Tiruvalluvar, but Meena speaks for Tiruvalluvar there, translates him in. How much freedom have you taken with that translation? One.
Yes, sure.
And also, can you read a little from it and talk a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sabi, for this question. The thing is that one of those things that, you know, we want to discuss a little bit more in detail is about people who can, you know, writers who write in two languages, that kind of bilingualism, but also writers who, for some reason, or, you know, because they happen to be translators or work primarily in one language and then, you know, also write in English, is that how do you inhabit these two? And I think for me as a translator, and I've translated much more books than I have actually written, is that it becomes like one language becomes a kind of, you know, as I said, home, and the other is the place where you go out, and it's like the stage where you go and express yourself. And with Tirukural, it was quite really very interesting because you know, in general, the idea of translation is that often it's seen as a women's job, like cooking and cleaning, and, you know, it's seen as something that women should do. So most translators around the world, and you also have people like, you know, scholars like Lawrence, when you talk, you know, the invisibility of the translator and all of this shadow job, you know, the translator as the dutiful wife, or the chastity of the translation. So from all these multiple perspectives and reasons, it's become very feminine. And it's very interesting that when, even though that labor is, you know, feminized, or it's seen as, you know, some kind of social reproduction work or care work, what is very interesting is that when it comes to the classics, there's a complete inversion. That when it is a classic, they don't want a women's translation, because classics are so high and great and, you know, like above everybody's reach. So a classic has to be rendered, has to be, you know, even the commentary for classics have to be given by men, the translation of classics have to be done by men. So in 2000 years, and, you know, Tamil people were very proud that, you know, Iron Age started in Tamil Nadu. But even with the Iron Age starting in Tamil Nadu, even with 5,000 years of, you know, culture, civilization, that, you know, the Tirukural, which is 2,000 years old, was not translated by a woman. And that's not a small gap. It's not a historical gap. And it's not a gap that was waiting for, you know, me to come and fill. It was a gap that was imposed because of the kind of society we inhabit. And for me to take that and say that, you know, there are 250 poems in the love poetry of Tirukural, 250 kural. And a kural is like a couplet, it's not a couplet. And I was like, the women is there, you know, of the 250, at least 200 is about her feelings, about her desire. But why is she not outside the book? Why does she not exist as a paratextual person? Why does she exist only inside the text? And so to take her out for me was, you know, like a kind of rescue operation. And I was also like, the woman is a very strong person. So, you know, this man says, I look at the women and, you know, she strikes the fear of death in me. So she was already intimidating you. And, you know, like, but that very fierce, you know, almost intimidatory person doesn't exist outside. So I'll read a few examples and tell where I took the liberty, or not even liberty, actually expounded upon, you know, what Valluvar says. So in one of the famous kurals, she actually is talking about, in Tamil you have a lot of these, you know, emotional landscapes, right? So one of the famous landscape is parting, or when the beloved is away from the lover. So she says here, வருகமன் கொண்கண் ஒரு நாள் பருகுவன் பைதல் நோய் எல்லாம் கெட. And so the translation that I did is, one day my man will return, I shall drink, I shall devour and enjoy him until all my love sickness is destroyed. And this is where I thought that it's very physical explanation, or, you know, expression of how she feels, because she has been missing him. Paidal noi actually means, you know, the love sickness. And she says, until my love sickness goes away. And the only operative word there is Varugaman Kongan Orunal. So Orunal everybody knows is one day. Varugaman is going to come. Kongan is here, no, my man or the man I have a relationship with. Paraguvan is the operative word. Paidal no ellam kede, all my love sickness should disappear. So Paraguvan, everybody will say, like I just enjoy. Or it's a very mild word. But actually in Tamil, this word has 3 layers of meaning because, ancient Tamil or, what you call classical Tamil is still in some ways, relevant to us. So Paragu, the first is obviously drink. And the second meaning of Paragu is also to feast, to devour. And the third is, the word also means enjoy. And for me, it was important that Valluvar was not giving a small word there. He was giving a word that, embodies a universe of physicality, a universe of, female desire. So, and this is where I felt that, we have to, talk about it. And I won't read a lot of them, just one more poem and we'll go back to the top. She's again talking about what she's going to do when she meets him. So it says, Pulappen kol pulluven kollo kalappen kol kannanna kelir varin. So here she's having this emotional drama. What is she going to do when she meets him? And this again is, would I quarrel? Would I embrace? Would I have sex? When the love of my life, the light in my eyes returns to me. And I think it's a very beautiful again expression of female desire. And I wanted to bring that to the forefront. So now moving a little bit away from the Kural, I actually wanted to pick you on, you were telling me about A.K. Ramanujan yesterday.
I'm going to skip Ramanujan for the time being.
Okay.
Since we are actually with Desire and Kural.
Yeah, sure.
If I may, I attempted actually writing
the Sangam poems. Yeah.
Sangam, yeah. So I'm not going to read. It's a one-page poem, but yeah. But you know how it is. I mean, so what Meena has done also is aval paranjada avan paranjada aval paranjada ennalladannallo. Appo what he said, what she said are typically the titles of these poems. So this is what she said, if I can find it.
You want me to find it for you?
Yeah. What he said, what she said. That's the title of. So when I wrote it, actually, this was the time of early mobile phones. Everyone was typing in this SMS language. You leave out the vowels and you type because you had to save the space, right? So this is actually written in SMS language, really. Meet ennallathu udaharanathinnu MT ennu maathre ullu meet ennallathu. So what he said, what she said. He said, let's meet. She said, tell me where. He said, under the kurinji tree in my grand's dream. She said, leave the schmaltz to your gran. You will find me with jasmine flowers on my cropped hair, looking hideous. He said, the breeze wafts in your smell here now. She said, you old fool, that's gross, 'cause I ain't had a bath today. He said, you are gross, no fine feelings. He said, I pine for you, and I'm pale, and my bangles fall off my hand like empty moons. She said, come on, show me pink then. He said, the moon pierces my heart and you mock me. Come, C-U-M. Come under the Kurinji tree. This was like a very weak attempt. I mean, it's one of my early poems. But no, it's a weak attempt to also...
No, it's a very beautiful thing because actually one of the jokes, the running jokes about Sangam poetry is it's like a circular, round robin, what you call, like passing a joint kind of thing. So it's always like what she said to her friend, what her friend said to her mother, what the mother said to the father when she was out of short, what her father said to the mother, what he said to his friend, what his friend said to her friend. So it's almost like, love becomes, and it's really interesting because love is not only negotiated between two people, it primarily is, but there's all these situationships in which they go and unload it on their friends, and then it's the task of their friends to, so it's what she said, what he said is so intrinsic to it. but to take it to modern technology and to write about it as an SMS message, I think that's really really beautiful. And in some way it's also this crossing over from time and place, because communication was not so easy then, and now everyone's communicating all the time. So I wanted to also sorry for
No, I think what we both do is also to try and invert an idea of desire. Because ഇവിടെ, the bangles, the man is wearing the bangles, and his bangles, he's the one who's experiencing viraha. And his hands become so thin that his bangles fall off, right? So these inversions which already exist, right? In the Kural, there are the possibilities of inversions of gender roles. It already exists in the Kural, right? So to explore that more, where you kind of where different genders can inhabit different modes of desire, right? So you call your translation the Book of Desire, and those multiple desires. I think it's very crucial, that multiplicity of
yes,
subjects as well as emotions of desire.
and there's also a lot of fluidity, like as you said there's an inversion, but also like in one of the Kurals the girl says பெண்ணியலார் எல்லாரும் கண்ணின் பொது உண்பர் நன்னேன் பரத்தில் நின் மார்பு. What she says is everybody who has some femininity inside them. She doesn't say women. She says everybody who has some female feeling inside them, everybody who has some femininity, they're all feasting publicly on your chest. So I'm not going to hug you, embrace you, So it's like this lovers quarrel. So yeah, definitely I think the fact is what is it about attractive bodies, and who is attracted to whom? It's a grayscape that is best left with that kind of openness.
No, and so now that we are talking about love and also war, so A.K. Ramanujan of course calls his translations from the Kural and of Sangam poetry poems of love and war. I think it's time that we maybe moved from love to war.
Yes.
Because both of us have, we also inhabit very public roles as writers who intervene as writers politically in situations of conflict, in war, etc. So now that, of course, the Palestine didn't start on October 7th, right? It's started in 1946 with the Nakba. And both.
Please read the Palestinian poem if you have it with you.
Oh yeah, let me see. Yeah, so what I've been doing is I've written some poems in English for Palestine, but also I translated Rafat Alarir's If I Must Die into Malayalam, which I'll just read. This was actually, there was a project called, it was simply called If I Must Die, Poems for Palestine, where 121 writers from across the world translated the poem of Rafat Alarir, who was actually killed in the bombing, right? So, and it was 1 year since his being killed by bombing in Palestine, and on that day, there was like a live online podcast and poem. This was published as an anthology and all of that. So I translated Rafat into Malayalam. Njan Marikkanamenkil. The English title is If I Must Die. Rafat Alarir. Njan Marikkanamenkil, nee enne adijeevikkanam. Ende katha parayan. Ende വസ്തുക്കൾ വിൽക്കാൻ, ഒരു കഷ്ണം തുണി വാങ്ങാൻ, കുറച്ച് ചരടുകളും, വെളുപ്പു നിറത്തിൽ നീണ്ട വാലുള്ളത്. അപ്പോൾ ഗാസയിൽ എവിടെയോ ഒരു കുട്ടി സ്വർഗത്തിലേക്ക് കണ്ണും നട്ട് തീക്കുണ്ടത്തിൽ ആളിപ്പോയ ആരോടും തൻ്റെ മാംസത്തോടും തന്നോട് പോലും വിട പറയാതെ പോയ അച്ഛനെ കാത്തിരിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടി ആ പട്ടം കാണട്ടെ. നീയുണ്ടാക്കിയ എൻ്റെ പട്ടം. അത് മുകളിലേക്ക് പറക്കുന്നത് കണ്ട് ഒരു നിമിഷം കരുതട്ടെ, അവിടെ ഒരു മാലാഖയുണ്ടെന്ന്. സ്നേഹം തിരിച്ചു തരുന്ന മാലാഖ. ഞാൻ മരിക്കണമെങ്കിൽ അത് പ്രത്യാശ കൊണ്ടുവരട്ടെ, അതൊരു കഥയാവട്ടെ. ഭയങ്കര കവിതയാണ് കേട്ടോ അത്. It's very the translation of such works is actually, it's also very emotionally draining, right? I mean,
Yes.
so it's also love. So war, when one is doing translation, it's also an act of love. It's close reading, it's reading with care, it's remembering. In the case of killed or dead poets, it's also an act of remembering and caring, and it can be quite a draining experience. So I would ask you how your experience of translation, whether it's been, and also inhabiting the world as public writers as well, right? I mean, where we do intervene with our writing, not slogans so much as writing itself. This. So the multiple heads then, they become more and more and more languages, more worlds, more places. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഫോക്ക് ടങ്, പിളർന്ന നാവിന് കുറേ ഇടങ്ങളും ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ ഇടം, it would be nice, Meena, if
I read something.
Palestine.
Well, I've not written specifically on Palestine.
Yeah.
But I think I want to, take on what Sabi was telling me about war poetry. So one of the things that I actually realized was, in general, we have this idea that, there are writers, and then there are writers who are a little bit of activists. But what for me was really eye-opening was to realize that there are people who are actually fighters, and these fighters also happen to be writers. So it's not just writers who do a little bit of activism, or whatever activism they can. I'm not even sure we measure it out. But then there are actually activists who are like laying their lives out, fighters, rebels, commanders, guerrillas. And they are writing poetry, and what does it actually mean to look at their poetry? So one of my more interesting projects was to translate the poems written by women who are female tigers, female LTT cadres. And it's, on the one hand, it really breaks you, because you look at Captain Vanadi, Captain Kasturi, and you're looking at your poems, and then under a footnote it just says Captain Vanadi died in the Elephant Pass battle in 99. She was 21 years old. She was 20 years old. And you realize that there was no scope of, it was not like, you see, when I write, I think, okay, maybe I'll write one book, another book. But this is an idea that every poem you write could be your last poem. That, and when you live in this kind of a situation, and you are also, even within a struggle that can be very representative to women, 1/3 of the fighting force of LTT was women. But it's still possible that how do women also like express themselves? And for me that was quite interesting, because you don't have the space to write manifestos. When you're a female and you're also a fighter, you cannot write, the communist manifesto of saving the world. So poetry becomes like, this operative manifesto towards the world. And so many of these poems were dealing with, concepts of female liberation, concepts of homeland. And I think that was such a interesting territory. So, but do you want me to read a poem, or?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So when, we were talking about how do you, on the one hand, bring what is your own language, culture into what is happening today. And one of the poems that was quite interesting to me, which, it's an English poem, or more an English translation, but I was working or thinking through the idea that, the fight for religion, or, religious hegemony, majoritarianism, it's not necessarily something that, started in 2014. It's not something that started in 2002, that so much of Tamil and South Indian history actually is about this. So this is a poem written in the 7th century by this poet called Tirunavukarasar, or Appar. And the Jain Pallava emperor at that time wants to drag him and, literally sentence him to death. So when he's about to be dragged, these are the lines he speaks. And, for me it was really interesting. நாமார்க்கும் குடியல்லோம் நமனை அஞ்சோம் நரகத்தில் இடர்படோம் நடலை எல்லோம். We are not the subjects of anyone. We do not fear the god of death. We shall not suffer. Were we to end in hell, we have no disappointment, we have no illusions. Namarkum kudiyallom, namanai anjom, naragathil idarpadom, nadalai illom. Nobody's citizens and nobody's slaves, fearless of lynchings and beheadings, unscathed by the torrent of hellfires, we do not tremble at certain death. Namarkum kudiyallom, namanai anjom, naragathil idarpadom, nadalai illom. As people, we refuse to be ruled. As people, we refuse to die. As people, we refuse to suffer. As people, we refuse to be deceived. Namarkum kudiyallom, namanai anjom, naragathil idarpadom, nadalai illom. Thank you. I think that now we can open ourselves the floor to questions. Because another 10 minutes of questions, please. Please address your questions to Sabi because I have too many programs. I don't want to answer questions. But please, Sabi is here and I'll be very happy to moderate.
I request the one with questions to raise their hands.
You said that the translator's job is demanding. It is very, very draining process.
Yeah.
My question is regarding, you also quoted a poem where you quoted that if somebody is after a limping dog.
Somebody has to repeat the question to me, I think, because I can't hear.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why the poets are after the limping dogs. It is reminded of the Good Samaritan in Bible, where the Samaritan is always after the limping dog or the wounded dog. Our poets are good Samaritans.
Our poets? No, the good Samaritans.
Personally, I will ask you, what about you are an illustrious daughter of an illustrious father?
Bhayangara accent, I can't understand actually.
Yes.
You are an illustrious daughter of an illustrious father.
Okay. Father.
Your father as a mentor, I am asking you, as a poetic mentor of you, lot of his poems are dedicated to you. I have gone through that poems. That is why I am asking. So my questions are right. How you rate your dad as a mentor?
Actually, no. In fact, it's not a question I'm very fond of answering. Even though I've held an entire literary conversation with Jeet Thail on the relationship with father, as when both the father and the child are writers themselves. Now, Meena also spoke about that a little bit.
The father.
But you know, my father actually has not been my mentor. My mentor in Malayalam poetry has been Ayyappa Panikkar. He's the one, he published, and also it's a good thing that the father is not the mentor, right? It's a bit too close for comfort and, you know. So what we write for each other are, I think, poems of love and war. I write back as a daughter, as a female person, as a female identifying person, writing to a father figure, right? So there is also, you know, so there is that two genders thing. So the woman writing back to the man, the daughter writing back to the father. So I have a whole series of poems actually called Letters to Father, and as you said, Sachidanandan has written poems to his daughter, both his daughters. I get a poem every few years from my father, but I don't write back immediately. I have actually once or twice, but I have a whole series of it's a conversation with the father, right? And it's a conversation also about poetry and what Meena said, you know, okay being an approach, exactly that with my father, right? He never says anything I've written is good. He never says it, but he'll say, sheri. Sheri nu ketta kazhinja okay. That's the best approval I can get from my father.
No, but at some point you learn to appreciate it. But I also think in some ways, and I don't know, I have not necessarily gone to counseling for that. But I have always felt that, you know, the lack of my mother's approval is why I'm drawn to a certain type of man. I'm like, no, it's like everybody thinks, you know, it's the father who affects your relationship with men. No. For me, it's like, why do I go to a certain type of person? And whenever I'm with the person I love, I feel like I'm with my mother. I'm with the mother, a version of my mother who gives me more love. Not love, my mother gave me love. She never gave me appreciation. And my mother's entire argument was, your father has already filled your head with so much of praise. So there has to be somebody to reverse the gear, you know. So I think it's very interesting. But I think we also, for Sabi and for others, daughters and fathers also managed to find a middle ground. So my middle ground is that my father believes that no great literature was written after the classical period. So all the great literature stopped at 6th century. So what does it matter whether I write, whether Sachidanandan writes, Perumal Murugan writes, Salma writes? No, no, no. 6th century end point. so yeah, that's also perhaps why I go and impress him with the Kural and all that. But yes, fathers and daughters are very interesting. Any other question, please? Yes, yeah.
No, but I wanted to address that other point which I'll come to later, that whether the translator occupies the role of a good Samaritan. That's maybe for both of us, that question. Good Samaritan ആണോന്ന് അറിയില്ല, പക്ഷേ well, as Meena said earlier, it is a labor of care. Translation is a labor of care. Translation is a labor of love. And in that sense, a good Samaritan, I'm not very sure that's, it's an interesting analogy, thank you. It's given me something to think about. Good Samaritan ano translator nalla chodyam.
There's a question there.
Ma'am,
Yes.
first of all, I would like to ask for permission. Is it okay if I ask a question in Malayalam?
Please, yes, carry on, yeah.
Thank you. രണ്ടാളും തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളുകളാണല്ലോ. അപ്പോൾ തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത് കുറച്ച് ഏറ്റവും ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു ഫ്രേസാണ് ലോസ്റ്റ് ഇൻ ട്രാൻസ്ലേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. പക്ഷേ രവീന്ദ്രനാഥ് ടാഗോർ ഒരിക്കലും ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു വാക്ക് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നില്ല. ടു റീക്യാപ്ചർ ദ ഇമേജ് എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്, ഫ്രം ബംഗാളി ടു ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഓഫ് കോഴ്സ്. അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ ചോദിക്കുന്നതാണ്, നമ്മൾ തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത് മൂലകൃതിയിലുള്ള ഒരു സൗന്ദര്യം ഉണ്ടാവില്ല ഭാഷയ്ക്ക്, ആ ഭാഷയ്ക്കുണ്ടാവുന്ന സൗന്ദര്യം നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു പോവുകയാണോ, അതോ തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്ത് അതിപ്പോൾ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലോട്ട് തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഒരു പുതിയ സൗന്ദര്യം അതിന് കൈവരിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ? അപ്പോൾ ട്രാൻസ്ലേഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, ഈസ് ഇറ്റ് ദി ലോസ് ഓഫ് ബ്യൂട്ടി ഓർ ദി ഗെയിൻ ഓഫ് ബ്യൂട്ടി ഇൻ എ ന്യൂ ലാംഗ്വേജ്? ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് മൈ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ.
Do you want me to translate the question?
No, I understood a little bit. No, do you want to answer the question? No, I generally think that every work is very specific to that language. Like she was talking about viraham, right? As an emotion. In Tamil, we have a word, for instance, viragatabam. It's a type of longing that is extreme in its longing, and these are not easily. I mean, for me, it's not a question of translatability. It's a question of. I used to think about translation all the time as loss. It's a process of loss. It's a process of loss of meaning. It's a process of loss of intimacy. But I think that it's a little bit like, motherhood also. Like, sometimes you are losing so much, losing your time, losing your body. But on the other hand, what you end up nurturing, what you end up giving birth, what you end up putting out in the world, that has a life. That it doesn't matter what it has taken away from you, what you have lost, but that life exists in and of itself, And that way I think of translation as something that, as much as there is loss, there is a profound liveness to it and newness to it and beauty to it.
Can I just add to that? Because you referred to Rabindranath Tagore, അല്ലേ? അപ്പോൾ പക്ഷേ Task of the Translator എന്നുള്ള essay, Walter Benjamin's essay called Task of the Translator, that actually addresses, I think, this in the most beautiful manner, this question. Are we, because I mean, this is a long-standing debate. Is translation a loss, or are you creating something new? What exactly do you do when you translate? But the Task of the Translator, what Walter Benjamin actually talks about, what the translator does is, so the original is like a forest. The original is a forest, and the translator puts out a cry into that forest. and the forest echoes it back. So all the translator is doing is actually trying to the translator's task is to just make that echo. So, and the echo might be slightly distorted. The echo might not sound like the original sound you put out. When it comes back, it may come back in a slightly different kind of tone. So I think that's probably, the best answer to the question of what a translator does. It's a
Thank
labor
you,
of love,
ma'am.
it's a labor of care, it's engagement, it's echoing, it's creating, it's multiplying.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Our
everyone,
time
for
is
this
up.
evening.